Have you ever thought that perhaps the desire you feel, or that someone feels for you, has nothing to do with the body? That touching the skin is only the first step toward something much deeper, more dangerous, more revealing? According to Sartre, desire is not a mere biological impulse. It is not just flesh craving flesh. To desire is an existential act. It is a project, and this project harbors a secret ambition: to transform the other into part of yourself, to capture them, to possess them, not only in body, but in consciousness. Desire, in that sense, is almost an act of invasion. You don't want just the touch. You want the other's gaze, their recognition, their surrender. You want to be desired as a free being, and even more, you want the other to desire you freely, because only then is the conquest complete. The paradox is that this is never fully possible. The other is an inaccessible universe, a mystery that slips away. Imagine two people in a room. One tries to seduce the other with charm, gestures, insinuations. But true surrender occurs when there is a disturbance, when for a second the other feels seen, not as a body, but as consciousness, as freedom. It is in that instant that the risk emerges. Because to be seen as freedom implies responsibility, and that is what frightens. Desire is a silent battlefield. On one side, the will to merge, to become one. On the other, the resistance of freedom, which never allows itself to be imprisoned. Sartre would say that desire always fails. Because what you want is not just the body, it is the other's subjectivity, and that is never yours. You can possess a body, you can hear words, but you will never access the other's innermost self as if it were your own. That is unbearable for some. For others, it is where true love is born. Love that recognizes the distance between the two, yet chooses to remain. Therefore, when you try to seduce with the purely physical, you are playing a superficial game. Touching the body is like caressing the surface of an ocean. But what truly drowns, what truly transforms, is the dive, the contact with what the other tries to hide even from themselves, the anguish, the dreams, the fears. That is what is desired, even without knowing it, to touch the invisible, to be recognized for what is not shown. So the next time you desire someone, ask yourself, do I want the body, or do I want the being? And when someone desires you, try to perceive, are they wanting your skin, or your freedom? Seduction begins in the body, but it never ends there. The body is invitation, promise, surface. But what truly opens doors inside someone, what dismantles defenses and provokes surrender, is the invisible gesture of touching consciousness. That is where the danger lies. That is where the power resides. Think of two situations. In the first, someone dominates the other with charisma, beauty, technique. The other surrenders, but only up to a point. There is pleasure, there is partial surrender, but there is no disturbance, no transformation. In the second, the surrender does not occur through touch, but through something more subtle, attentive listening, a question that goes deep, a gaze that perceives what the other tries to hide. It is in this second type of encounter that something breaks. The other sees themselves, truly sees themselves. And in that moment, there is no more game. There is only truth. Sartre reminds us that man is condemned to be free. That means there is no fixed essence, no manual, no destiny written in the stars. We are projects in constant construction. And when someone perceives this project, when someone notices our choices, our escapes, our contradictions, it is as if we were naked for the first time. Not in body, but in consciousness. This is far more intimate than any caress. This is what truly disarms. The body, by itself, can be desired, explored, dominated, but that dominion is shallow, because the body is given, visible, finite. Consciousness, on the other hand, is pure freedom, and no one can endure having their freedom exposed without feeling anguish. That is why so many people flee when they begin to be truly seen. And that is why so many relationships remain on the surface, because it is safer, more comfortable, less transformative. But deep desire demands risk. It will not be satisfied with skin. It wants the soul laid bare. It wants the other as mystery, as irreducible presence. And only those who dare to go beyond performance touch that dimension. Those who abandon the seduction script and enter the territory of genuine encounter. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever stood before someone who seemed to see you in a way no one else did? Someone who, with a simple phrase, dismantled your facade and touched something you didn't even know how to name? That is not forgotten. That changes everything. Because in that moment, you were not merely desired, you were recognized as freedom. And that, for Sartre, is the true field of desire. Not to want the other as object, but as subject. Not to dominate, but to risk oneself. Not to conquer the body, but to find the consciousness. The key lies there, but not everyone wants to open that door. And there is a strange, almost magical moment in which the other's gaze captures us. We are in the middle of a conversation or in a loaded silence, and suddenly we feel we are being seen. Not observed, seen, exposed. Sartre called this being for others. It is when we cease to be merely subjects and become objects in someone else's consciousness. And that changes everything. The gaze is a trap because it carries a powerful ambiguity. It can seduce, and it can imprison. It can reveal, and it can dominate. When someone looks at us, we become visible not only physically, but existentially. The other's freedom defines us, limits us, gives us back an image that we may not recognize. That is why the gaze holds such power. It does not touch the skin. It touches the being. Have you ever tried to escape someone's gaze? Have you ever looked away because you felt that, if you continued, something inside you would unravel? Or, conversely, have you ever held someone's gaze firmly, challenging them to stay there, to see you whole? These experiences are not mere seduction games. They are exercises in freedom, and therefore profoundly dangerous. Sartre describes this experience as a form of nausea, because, in the moment we are seen, we cease to be free consciousness and become thing. The other's gaze transforms us into an image, into a character, and anguish is born there, in the conflict between being free and at the same time reduced to what the other sees. But there is also a hidden power in that vulnerability, because when someone truly looks at us, without the intention to reduce, without judgment, without game, what happens is not imprisonment. It is revelation. We are invited to exist more authentically, to step out of character and inhabit the being. The gaze that does not pretend, that does not manipulate, that does not demand. That is the gaze that transforms. And perhaps that is the moment when someone really surrenders, not to the body, not to the words, but to the fact that, for a second, they were seen in their totality, with all they are, strength and fragility, freedom and fear, desire and shame. It is in that instant that connection is born, not through domination, but through recognition. So the next time you meet a gaze that disarms you, ask yourself, am I being seen? Or am I hiding? Am I being touched? Or am I merely playing? Because in the end, the gaze is more than seduction. It is a choice, a summons, an existential mirror asking, are you ready to be who you are, even when someone is looking? Have you noticed how often we hide precisely when we most want to be seen? We feign nonchalance when we are desperate for attention. We use humor to avoid pain. We create seductive personas to escape insecurity. Sartre called this movement bad faith, the conscious self-deception, the lie we tell ourselves to avoid the weight of freedom. In relationships, bad faith is a choreography disguised as spontaneity. The person who says they do not care is actually testing whether the other cares. The one who always appears strong may be afraid of abandonment, and those who pretend not to want anything serious may be terrified of being truly rejected. Bad faith is that, a desperate attempt to escape who we are, while performing what we think the other desires. Sartre said we are condemned to choose, even when we think we are not choosing. And every gesture, every word, every silence in a relationship reveals an existential project. Even when we deceive ourselves, we are choosing to deceive ourselves. And that comes at a price. Bad faith generates an invisible distance, an abyss between what we show and what we feel. It is in that space that frustration, resentment, and loneliness are born. To seduce can be a form of bad faith, not because desire is false, but because many times we use seduction to flee from something more genuine, the fear of being rejected for who we truly are. We prefer to be loved for the persona rather than to be hated for our authenticity, but that condemns us to superficiality, to relationships where we are desired for what we pretend to be, not for who we really are. But there is something even more disturbing. Sometimes in relationships we use the other as a mirror, not to see ourselves, but to escape ourselves. We seek in the other validation, distraction, anesthesia. And when the other looks at us with depth, we feel anger, because they threaten the theater we have built. They force us to face what we have tried to escape. The problem is that bad faith never holds up for long. Sooner or later the mask slips, and then there are only two options: deepen the lie or confront the truth. The first drives us away from the other and from ourselves. The second brings us closer but requires courage. The courage to say, I am this here, with fear, with contradictions, with the desire to be loved and the fear of not being enough. Can you perceive where in your relationships you are acting in bad faith? At what moments you hide behind seductions, personas, or excuses? And more importantly, what would happen if you dropped that role and showed yourself honestly? There is a raw and, at the same time, liberating truth hidden at the heart of every desire. We do not want only the other. We want the other to want us, and more. We want them to want us, freely, consciously, irresistibly. Desire, at its core, is not just direction, it is reflection. To desire is to want to be desired. Sartre said that to want to be loved is to desire to be recognized as freedom. It is to ask the other to see in us not only a body, a function, a presence, but a living consciousness in motion, capable of choosing. And that is precisely what makes desire so complex. Because surrender is only real when it is voluntary. Surrender only has value when it is a choice. It is not about provoking desire in someone as if pressing a button. It is about being chosen by someone who could choose not to, and yet chooses. Perhaps that is why there are so many ways to seek that recognition. Some try to win it with the body, cultivating beauty, sensuality, performance. Others seek it in discourse, with intelligence, humor, enchantment. Still others attempt to obtain it through listening, being the one who welcomes, who understands, who does not judge. None of these forms is false in itself, but all can become disguising strategies if they are not aligned with the truth of the being. Because the desire that truly transforms is not the one that imposes, that dominates, that manipulates. It is the one that reveals, that offers the self to the presence of the other, that says, through silence or through gaze, I am here, I am this, see me. And when the other responds, not with submission, but with freedom, that is when the encounter happens. There is no control in that instant. There is only mutual surrender. Two existential projects recognizing each other. Two abysses gazing at one another and for a second not retreating. That is why true desire is so rare. Because it demands vulnerability. It demands laying aside the game, the mask, the defense, and that frightens us. We prefer to control the other's desire rather than risk not being desired in return. But that control is an illusion. No one desires an object for long. What truly attracts us is the other's freedom, the uncertainty, the possibility of refusal. Because only when there is the possibility of not being chosen does the yes have value. So ask yourself, when you desire someone, are you desiring a presence or seeking confirmation? And when you seek to be desired, what are you offering? The body, the image, or the being that you truly are? There are touches that bind, others that merely excite, but there are some, rare ones, that liberate. These are gestures not laden with intention to possess, but of presence. Touches that do not aim to capture, but to recognize. And it is this kind of touch that transforms the encounter into revelation, because it is not the contact with skin that makes us surrender. It is the invisible touch that says, "I see you." Sartre reminds us that the human being is not a predefined essence. We are not objects to be decoded, but projects in constant construction. That is why, when someone touches us with their eyes, with their words, or with their silence, and not with the urge to label or control us, it is as if they free us from the prison of appearing. We can, at last, simply be. Have you ever lived that? A touch without urgency, without agenda, without performance. A touch that wants nothing beyond being there. That does not rely on the desire to change you, but on the willingness to find you. It is disconcerting, because it takes us out of defensive mode. It disarms the persona. It breaks the armor. Suddenly, we don't know how to react, because in that moment, we are not being seduced. We are being seen. The touch that sees is the one that goes beyond the body. It is the gesture that notices when you pretend to be okay. It is the hug that requires no reciprocation. It is the hand that does not squeeze, but offers steadiness. It is the presence that remains when appearances have fallen away. It is not invasive. It is space. It is invitation. And it is in that kind of presence that real surrender happens. Because no one surrenders to control. People surrender when they feel safe to be themselves, when they realize they need not pretend, that they can exist there with all their flaws, fears, and contradictions. That is where the bond is born. That is where the cycle of superficial seduction breaks, and one enters the territory of authenticity. But this touch is difficult, because it requires that you be whole, that you are not trying to prove anything, nor to conquer anyone, that you are willing to see the other, even when that reveals parts of yourself you would rather not face. It is a gesture of courage, of openness, of surrender as well. So the next time you touch someone, with words, with gestures, with silence, ask yourself, am I trying to bind or to free? Am I touching the skin or seeing the being? Is there anything more seductive than someone who is whole in what they say, in what they feel, in what they choose? Authenticity has its own magnetism, not because it seeks to please, but precisely because it does not need to. It is the opposite of performance. It is the abandonment of the mask, of the act, of the attempt to seem interesting. It is when someone decides to be instead of perform. Sartre said that man is nothing but what he makes of himself, and to make oneself is a radical act. It demands presence, choice, responsibility. Authenticity is that, to assume who you are being now, even if that changes tomorrow. Not to feign desire when there is doubt. Not to say everything is fine when it is not. Not to seduce out of fear of rejection, but to allow yourself to be seen even in imperfection. It is difficult to be authentic in relationships, because we have learned to seduce to survive, to perform, to belong, to hide so as not to lose. But what is won that way is fragile, because whoever desires the persona never reaches the person, and whoever surrenders to the theater will never be truly loved. Authenticity is the real aphrodisiac because it offers something scarce, trust. It says without words, you can relax. I am not here to beat you. I am here to be with you. And that, in a world of masks, is irresistible. Not because it promises perfection, but because it offers truth. Want an exercise? Observe your next intimate conversations. Notice at what moments you adapt to please, at which points you exaggerate to impress, and try, just for an instant, to interrupt that. Logic. Say something truthful, something you would say even if you knew it wouldn't please, and see what happens. Authenticity may frighten at first. It may even drive away those who only seek the superficial, but it also attracts those tired of the game, those who want to find, not just be entertained, those ready to strip away the ego and enter the territory of mutual vulnerability. And in the end, it is only in that territory that someone truly surrenders, not because they were conquered, but because they were touched, not in the flesh, but in the being. Because there, in the face of the other's authenticity, they recognized something they had long sought, permission to be themselves too. If you've read this far, you may already have realized that true desire is not born of control. It is not sustained by appearance, and it does not end in the body. The desire that transforms, that brings about authentic surrender, is the one that crosses the surface and touches consciousness. It sees the other not as an object to be possessed, but as freedom to be discovered. You have seen that desire is existential, that the body is only a door, and the key lies in what is invisible: consciousness, gaze, choice. You have also seen that the gaze can be trap or revelation. That bad faith is the lie we tell ourselves to avoid facing the truth. That to desire is to want to be desired, not as an image, but as presence. That the most potent touch is the one that sees. And that authenticity is the true aphrodisiac, because only it invites the other to lower their defenses and show themselves whole. Sartre gave us the tools to understand that there are no guarantees. There is no formula to seduce, conquer, or bind someone. And that is not a tragedy. It is a liberation. Because the moment we accept that the other is free, radically free, we begin to build real relationships. Encounters where there are no games, only presences. Where there are no scripts, only choices. Where there are no masks, only beings in search of meaning. So I invite you now to look at your relationships. Where are you trying to control, manipulate, pretend? Where could you simply be? Who would you be if you were no longer afraid of not being chosen? Choose who you want to be today, and allow others to do the same. Perhaps, in that space of mutual freedom, someone will finally surrender, not to your body, but to your presence. Write in the comments. What was the moment in your life when you felt truly touched? And, even more, who was able to see you, not from the outside, but from within?